You gonna enter?
Hey, everybody. Welcome to the 12 Principles of the Steps of Alcoholics Anonymous workshop. We are in February and we're going to be talking about uh, step 2 today and the principle of hope. And Stephen and Nancy have agreed to facilitate this workshop, so I'll turn it over to them.
Thank you, Lara, and Cindy and Marty and Claudia and Bernice. Welcome. So, as you know, this recording gets set on our YouTube channel, and people view it to see what we have to say about the principle of hope. And I think to get started off today is I wanted to get my phone working here. Is to talk a little bit about the word hope and the dynamic of the word hope, and then we'll talk about how it relates to step 2. And these aren't original writings that I'm reading or anything. They're off various sources. But hope is important because it can help us to cope with our difficult times, achieve our goals, live a more fulfilling life, and reduce the risks of mental despair. Hope reduces fear and worry about the unknown and helps us stay calm and focused. And how is it as a spiritual principle? Well, to start off with, to talk for a minute about the nature of a spiritual principle, not just hope, but any spiritual principle, the very nature of one is that it's always true in every circumstance with no exceptions. And hope as a spiritual principle, um, it brings about a dynamic of certainty. And in AA we hear often that we want to talk about our experience, our hope, and dreams and all that. There's some acronyms for hope too, like happiness, opportunities, prosperity for everyone, or hearing other people's experience. And how's that helpful? How does that help us get well? Well, many of us have come to AA, and in a way we misinterpret the dynamic and principle of hope. We come and we think our life's hopeless. Here I am in AA, there is no hope. But see, even in saying those words, we're there because there actually is a hope that there can be a positive outcome, even though we can't see it, and even though we may actively resist it. Hope can be like an anchor, reminding us about a certain outcome AA claims, and then taking a couple words from the promises will always materialize if we work for it. And hope can be real interesting because we can verbalize that we don't believe it'll work for us. I've messed up my life too much, but yet there we are in a room filled with people that have transcended where we are and give us the AA smile, like, I know how you're feeling, Steve, but keep coming back. And I think that keep coming back can be so helpful, particularly in the beginning, because it keeps that flame of hope going, even if we don't recognize it. It just coming, and even if we're claiming we have no hope, we haven't given up because we're there. And hope becomes a reason to continue our very lives sometimes. And so when we greet a newcomer or we're greeted at a new meeting even, we all know how that feels. Like, wow, I, that person just smiled and said, thank you, or thank you for coming and welcome. It manifests the principle of hope that there's goodness. There's other words I could use, but there's goodness in the future, even though I can't picture how a positive outcome can show up in my life right now, because I've convinced myself that I'm beyond hope, and I've neglected to see the obvious contradiction that, hey, if I'm beyond hope, why am I there? And so it's just another lie I've told myself, that I'm beyond hope, because we've all heard, those of us here, we've all got time. We've all heard from people, hey, I'm hopeless, and this will never work for me. And we all do the same thing. We smile and say, I know that's how you're feeling. Keep coming back. Then we can introduce them to the steps. Particularly, we can get to step 2, where, we're going to come to believe, we're going to believe in our hope that there is a power that everybody's talking about. They got it written on the wall. They read it when they open the meeting. They came to believe that there's a power greater than ourselves that can restore us to sanity. And so I think behind that is this hope that it can somehow possibly be true, even though I don't believe it for a second, because of the situation I'm in today, which is all there is to me. In fact, later on in AA, I'm going to try and make kind of a not a joke, but a pun about this. Later on in AA, we hold meetings and workshops about living in the present, and that's where reality is. And kind of it seems a way up on the path to sobriety and spirituality to be talking about living in the present. But we can look at a newcomer and see what it's like to live in the present too. In their present, everything's bad. There's nothing positive going on, but yet here they are at an AA meeting with the same opportunities we all had, to see what other people have done. Again, that acronym, hearing other people's experiences, hope. And I think for most of us, that's a common situation that was very healing for us. We heard other people's experiences, and hey, maybe it'll work for me too. I don't see how it could, but maybe it'll work for me. And isn't that even what happened when Bill got the call from Ebby in his kitchen? Bill's drinking, and Ebby told him he wasn't. And Bill couldn't even imagine Ebby not having a drink. And in fact, according to the literature, when Ebby came over, Bill had a bottle on the table. But behind all that, you can see that somehow Bill hoped that Ebby's experience could rub off on him. And, look what happened. AA's all over the world now from that, a meeting in their kitchen. Anyway, so there's a little bit about hope as I saw it for a while. And what we do in this podcast is, for those who care to, and we want to share a little bit about what hope's meant to us and how we've seen it with the second step, or any variation of that, because our experience and our hope has brought AA to where it is today, and we've all benefited from that, or we wouldn't be here. Okay, so enough from me. And Claudia, do you want to start us off?
Sure. How long do I have? About 10 minutes or so?
Sure.
Okay.
We
Hi,
have a we have a real friendly timer.
Mhm. Okay, my name is Claudia. I'm an alcoholic. And a number of things went. Thank you, Steve. Thank you, Steve, for asking us. Um, hope. Um, second step came to believe that a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity. Well, I've I usually start out when I'm talking about my first day of sobriety, which I didn't expect to be my first day of sobriety. If you had asked me the day before if I had planned on the next day going to an AA meeting and being relieved from the obsession to drink and would then stay sober for many years going forward, I would have thought you were crazy. It wasn't my plan. I hadn't made any promises. I didn't have anyone um, at my heels, threatening or telling me I needed to get sober. I hadn't gone to jail. I never got a DUI. Uh, in fact, I didn't even go to treatment. Um, I knew my life was a mess. And it's funny because in terms of this the second step, uh, I thought I was insane. That part of it, the insanity of my life was not something difficult for me to wrap my mind around. Good. I was on the verge of losing another job. My relationships were a mess. I was a single mom with 2 kids, uh, and I was resentful at everybody. Uh, and I was sure that if everybody else would get their act together, ranging from my ex-husband to my next door neighbors and my landlady and my boss and people I had had relationships with, that if I could get all those pieces of my life together, everything would be fine. So fast forward 24 hours. I had gone out the night before. I was already drinking. I had a date. I drank all evening, and I came out of a blackout the next morning on my living room floor. And I had my first response was a horrible demoralization, horrible feeling, horribly sick, miserable. And my first thought was, I can't do this anymore. Uh, Even if my first words probably were something like, "Oh God, help me." And my second thought was, I need to call Alcoholics Anonymous. I need help. Uh, which I did. I looked up in the yellow pages and I found AA. And I called at 6 in the morning on a Sunday morning, and someone answered and directed me to a meeting that afternoon, and the rest is history. I had heard about AA on a series of television programs. I was watching LA Law, and the guy was going to AA meetings, and I was watching Cagney and Lacey, and someone left a big book on Lacey's death because they were concerned about her drinking. I had dated a guy uh, who was a recovering drug addict who went to AA meetings and still drank. And we would drink, and he would tell me about AA. And um, it wasn't like I woke up and said, I hope this works. I um, had a sense that this was the only path. Uh, that morning, because my kid's going to Sunday school, I'm sitting with another mother and I'm saying, my life is a mess. I said, I think I'm an alcoholic. My life is a mess. And I called AA, and I'm going to my first meeting this afternoon. And I believe it's going to work. I hope it's going to work. Um, and I was willing to do whatever I needed to do to stop the insanity. And I hadn't even thought about quitting drinking as part of it. I just needed to stop doing the things that I was doing and the consequences of drinking and how I felt. And I walked into that meeting, and it wasn't about hoping this worked. I had a sense of confidence that this was the right thing to do. I said to that woman, I'm going, I'm going to give it a shot. And it's almost after I came to, I at that moment really did believe that that this was a solution. And it's really interesting because that word hope has, maybe I've always had a realistic appraisal of what it is I hope for. I really did. I wanted my life to change. I wanted my life to get better. I wanted to stop doing the things I did when I was drinking, and I drank every day. And I believed that if I did what I was supposed to do, if I went to these meetings, if I started reading this literature they talked about, got a sponsor and did these things, I was really convinced that this, I'm going to say would work, could work. I didn't have, I think where my experience was different from a lot of other people was I did not have the luxury of time to think. I literally did not have the luxury to think about whether I could do this, whether this was going to work, whether they were telling me the truth. I got up in the morning, I got my kids ready, and I dropped them off at daycare. I worked an 8-hour day, and I'd have to go pick them up, and I made them dinner. And I got people to come and babysit because I didn't want to drag them to meetings at 8 o'clock at night in smoky rooms. And I went to meetings, and I did that over and over and over again. And I could look back and almost see a pattern of success. And so my belief, my coming more on the second step, my coming to believe that power greater than myself could restore me to sanity. I was told by a woman at my very first meeting, and I said, what am I supposed to do? And she gives me this: get on your knees in the morning and ask God to keep you sober and say thank you at night. I was willing to do that. I was willing to do whatever I did. I said, I don't know what I believe in. And she said, it doesn't matter, do it anyway. And I did. And it wasn't, and maybe I'm the wrong person to reflect on the concept of hope. I really did believe that if I did what people were talking about, maybe using hope in this term, there was a hope for me. There was a hope that my life was going to get better. It wasn't a matter of hoping it were. It was about hoping that my life would change. And slowly but surely it did. And I lost my job when I was 6 months sober. And not everything was wonderful. And yet, I met the man I was going to marry. I went to some meetings that were intolerable, and my first sponsor was awful. And but I kept going. I just didn't have time to think, gee, what else is there? What else am I going to do? It was just a matter of constantly knowing what meeting I was going to, keeping in calling somebody every day. I had relationships with people early on. I don't even remember their names. But I just remember we were connected. And that hope turned into, gee, I got through that. I think I could get through this next thing. And it did. So I developed a track record of being able to stay sober. I remember going to a wedding, and Marty and I we had just been dating. We were invited to a wedding, and we're sitting at a table. They put us at the table next to the bar. It was not a sober wedding. It was somebody, a mother of one of the kids my kids were in daycare with. And we went to their wedding, and we're sitting at a table at the bar. And it wasn't about, gee, I hope I can avoid temptation. In fact, our table was where all the drunks were coming and hanging out. They'd leave the bar and they were just sitting down. And it never occurred to me that drinking was going to be a solution. And again, over and over again, I faced, and even today, over and over again, I face trials and tribulations that if I haven't gone through them, somebody I know has gone through them, and they've gotten through them sober. So I did come to believe that this power, whatever it was going to work. And it did. It continued to work. From my perspective and from everything I've heard over the years, whether this power was the great deity, somebody you call God, something from a more religious perspective, or whether it was this group of drunks or this good orderly direction or this gift of desperation, that I came to believe that this power greater than myself would restore me to sanity. And I can look back and say, I never doubted it. I really never doubted that this was going to work. At the very beginning, I always thought if they had told me that part of it was every day I had to sit in a lotus position for 30 minutes, I would have damn well done that. Because I ran out of ideas. And I ran out of, I had a stack of books on my nightstand. I had been through therapy. I had been through EST. I had built through Silva mind control. I had looked at my inner child. I had gone to 2 other 12-step programs because I thought my problem was I needed to lose weight, or my problem was the guys I was dating who drank too much. So I had gone to OA. I had gone to Al-Anon. I was reading Melanie Beatty, and I was like, I hope this works. And none of it was fixing it. And there I was in that moment of desperation, in that laying on the floor in my living room going, now what the hell am I supposed to do? And God help me. And knowing that what I had seen on LA Law and what I had seen in Cagney and Lacey and what Carrie had talked to me about, and it all came back to me. And dancing at the bar, going to a bar and dancing with this guy who was there all the time. And he was a limousine driver with a long scarf. He kind of looked like Doctor Who. And I would say, oh, what are you drinking? And he said, oh, I don't drink. I'm sober, he says. But I really like to dance. And so all of those things came to me at that moment of desperation. And I was, and even to this day, I'll finish with, even to this day, I don't say I hope I can get through that. I hope I could get through my mother's stuff with Alzheimer's. I hope I could get through, my daughter, my daughter's difficult marriage and her divorce. I know I can because I just do. And I watch other people and see what they do, and I follow what they do, and I can do it. So I don't know if I talked about hope
I,
because I was
I think
hopeless. I was saying I knew I was a hopeless drunk who drank every day. And for some reason, on October 7th, 1990, I didn't have to hope this would work. I knew it would, and I did the work, and it did. So that's it.
thank you, Claudia. And I think your story um, um, brought out the very essence of what hope is. Thank you so much for your share. And Nancy?
Thanks. I'm Nancy, an alcoholic. And thank you, Stephen, for your opening remarks. And thank you, Claudia, for which I thought was a great talk about hope. I love the example of when you're sitting at the bar at the wedding, you weren't hoping that you weren't going to drink. You had certainty. You knew. And I think that is, hope is so necessary. Since we come in with this hopeless state of mind and body, hope must be found. And maybe that's why it is introduced early, like in step 2. And I think the ideal is that, or the process turns our hope into certainty, and maybe again and again and again. But I know when I was in AA for about 3 years and going to a lot of meetings, and although my lifestyle didn't really reflect a sober lifestyle, I mean, I wasn't drinking, but the lifestyle wasn't really what you'd call sober or transparent or honest or whatever. But when I finally met someone who had gone through the steps in the book and offered to take me through, and it was practically on the eve of, I think I got the set aside prayer. I think I started to say that. Everything started to fall apart and things got very scary. And what he told me, he shared his experience, strength, and hope with me. I didn't see it as hope at the time, but when he said it to me, it gave me hope. And what he said was, you are on your way and you are safe and protected, even though you won't always feel that way. And for some reason, that went straight into my consciousness, and I never forgot it. And when things did start to really, shift and the earthquake all the happenings started, which all needed to happen, I remembered that he said, that I was still safe and protected, even though I wouldn't always feel that way. That gave me hope. That gave me the hope to continue. The hope met me exactly where I was. And I think that's the plan of hope. God knows we need it in order to, come to the next meeting, to write that inventory, to make those amends, that those are, that it's built on hope. And I do think too, that a principle is something that's always true. And the thought that I had about that was that is true, if I'm perceiving correctly. Like I can stand, like I used to have the image in my mind that I'm standing in the center court of a basketball court, and trying to make a basket from center court, which I can hope all day long. And that ain't going to go in, likely not going in. But I guess the rest of the steps provide that framework of right thinking and of right action, trial and error, and uncovering the mistakes that I've believed all my life, uncovering them, wanting to turn them over, wanting to, having the desire to be sane, be sober and sane. Let's see. And I guess the last thing I might say is that my hope, the idea of hope, meaning I don't have proof. I hope this is so, like that the truth would be reliable, that say God reliance was something that I could hope for. And in order to turn my attention there, to give that a try, I guess I had to see that the self-reliance was an absolute disaster. Sooner or later, it was going to end in a crash and burn every time it did. So placing my hope in the truth and withdrawing hope from self-will, that became like the slow process of recovery for me. So with that, I'll turn it back to you, Stephen. Thank you.
Thank you, Nancy. And I also wanted, before I call on Marty, I wanted to again thank Marty and Claudia for joining us for hopefully the year-long discussion of these different principles. They come to us from District 46, which is mainly Whidbey Island and some of the other lesser islands, as we would say. So appreciate you sharing your insights and wisdom from the islands. So Marty, you're up.
Thank you, Steve. My name's Marty. I'm an alcoholic.
Marty.
And thanks for getting us started. Of course, my case is different, always. And, that's the story I always told myself from the very beginning. And when I think of the hopeless, so I was struggling with control, attempting to control my drinking, because I thought people were starting to say things about it, and I thought, well, I better do something. I'm in this custody thing for my son, and I was really struggling and failing miserably. I was, and I went to visit this friend, and I don't remember in the first podcast if I talked about this, but I went to visit this old friend, and even while I was driving there, I was thinking, he's going to probably offer me a drink. How do I say no? And I got there, and he did just the opposite. What I didn't realize was he was 18 months clean and sober, and he told me his story. And suddenly, I now know that what I experienced was hope at that point. Oh, this can be done. I don't need to struggle. And I went to my first meeting that night. Now, I wasn't quite ready, obviously. And I went to meetings for 30 days, but I relapsed, and it took a couple of months. It took a couple of months for me to truly become hopeless. And what I was hopeless about was the fact that what I was doing wasn't working. I was absolutely convinced that I could no longer continue to live the way I was living. And to me, that was a definition of hopeless. And but I knew from my experience with Alcoholics Anonymous that there were people that were relatively happy, functioning in society and living without drinking. And that was the definition of hope for me, which led me back to Alcoholics Anonymous. And that very day that I walked back through the doors, by the end of the day, I think I pretty much experienced the first 3 steps. I'd absolutely admitted my powerlessness, that I couldn't drink, and that my life was unmanageable. And then that, I was kind of 12-step. It's 12-stepped in this meeting that I went back to, and I just sat and listened, and became willing, and was given the hope that there is a solution, and maybe you'd like to try our solution, and maybe we can introduce you to somebody that can help you, which was my first sponsor. And and I made the decision to do that. And I truly believe that was hope in action for me, was that, okay, I think this will work. I believe this is going to work. I've seen the results in other people. And so I started that journey. So hope was something that it kind of grew in me as well. That the more I saw people, not just not drinking, because at first I thought, well, I have a little drinking problem I need to take care of. And then what you taught me was, no, we put down the drink and then we deal with the living problem. We deal with the real problem, which is centered in the mind. And it's me, it's my selfishness and self-centeredness, and that again gave me more hope that there's a solution to this screwed up life and the way I've behaved and the way I've treated people. And that it continues to be there. I think that that my willingness to listen to other people tell me their story, and in my open-mindedness that maybe the story I told myself isn't really correct, but maybe someone else's experience can help me, change. And that's hope too. That again, that's hope in action. And I continue to just live that. And in these days and times, and of course it's throughout history, there's always been turmoil and wars and everything going on. And the fact is that how do I live with peace and calm in the middle of the storm? And I mean, all the way back to the Stoic philosophers of ancient Greece and Stoicism that started about, I'm going to guess 360 BC. So these are old spiritual lessons, but they continue to demonstrate hope in that there is a solution. I can see that it works in other people. It's obvious, and I can have this life. The one of the stumbling blocks for me was the God concept, and I've been through that. I don't need to go down that road, but I was told, what we've heard over and over again, that is there a power greater than yourself? And I was absolutely convinced of that. I'd experienced a power greater than myself in my, at work in my life, and I found Alcoholics Anonymous to be a power greater than myself, and I absolutely turned my will and my life over to Alcoholics Anonymous and in all aspects of it, not just the fellowship, but the program itself. And it's reaped wonderful benefits. And yeah, and hope is alive. You know, we say this too shall pass. And I think that's hope, you know, yes, this too shall pass. And our lives are incredible today. We've been down some bumpy roads through sobriety, and we've also seen a lot of people go through some incredible things and stay sober. And yeah, so anyway, that's all I've got on hope, Steve, and I hope that helped.
Thanks, Marty. I think with everybody sharing, we still get to hear from Cindy. It's Alcoholics Anonymous, I think as we know it, couldn't exist without hope. Cindy.
I would have to agree with that. Cindy, alcoholic. And the first feeling of hope was when I realized I didn't have to think about alcohol all the time. That it was in the rooms that I saw that people weren't thinking about alcohol. They were talking about their lives. And that that if I did what everybody was telling me, that I wouldn't have to think that way anymore. And what's the difference between wishful thinking and hope? And the wishful thinking was sitting on the couch with a glass of wine, wishing that I didn't drink anymore. And the hope was that if I did some stuff, the act of actually doing something, that I could make my life better. Hope is the difference between just sitting in that despair and not seeing a way out. And hope is when you see that there's a way out, that you can take it, that you can move in a different direction. And I was in a meeting where somebody says, I don't like to talk about hope because it's kind of like future tripping. And I thought about that for a while, and I thought, no, future tripping is when I am saying to myself, okay, then I'm going to do this, and then I'm going to do that, and it's all my ideas. And hope is kind of outside of me. It's bigger than me, and it's doing things that are not in my head, and that I have to do something. I was reading a book just randomly, and she was talking about hope as that hope is a difference between despair and progress. The progress is the hope. And that I love this, that progress is labored for. It's birthed. Progress is birthed and labored for. And it's not an easy road. It's changing. And I know personally, I don't like change. So to do that is hard. And I saw, I looked up hope today, and there was a quote from Emily Dickinson, which was that hope is the thing with feathers that perches in the soul and sings the tune without the words and never stops at all. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Cindy. And again, in Alcoholics Anonymous, we hear about experience, strength, and hope. And that hope that we can pass on is when the newcomer sticks around a little bit and from a place of impossible for his life to get any better, sometimes in the shortest period of time, couple weeks, couple months, we've seen a complete transformation. And again, we get to pass on the hope that that's possible for all of us. And we're especially blessed here today because Lara was able to come in before the time ended.
But I have nothing to say. Yeah. I don't, hi, I'm Lara, I'm an alcoholic. No, I have nothing to say, but I am, I appreciate Steve and Nancy and Cindy and everyone showing up, for this workshop, and, especially grateful that it gets to be on the YouTube channel and can reach as many people who wish to hear the message. So I really appreciate you all coming.
Well, thanks, Lara. And if anybody has, as we all know by now, we're real loose on crosstalk and all that, or any additional comments. And if not, I hope we can close with the responsibility prayer. But I would say next month is going to be pretty fun because it's about action.
Nice.
Third step, action.
Good.
So I promise I have very little to say on that. Okay, so I think how we've started to end these workshops is with the question, who is responsible?
Yes.
I am
I am
responsible.
responsible.
When
When
anyone,
anyone,
anywhere reaches
reaches
out
out
for
for
help,
help,
I
I
want
want
the
the hand of AA always to
Always
be
to be there.
And for that, I am
I am
responsible.
responsible.
And I hope we always are. Hey, thank you, you guys, and hey, maybe see you tomorrow morning.
Good to see you, Claudia
I hope
and
so.
Marty.